Hello, and welcome to this American History podcast entitled A Quick Look at the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution. The first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. They were added to the Constitution in 1791. The supporters of the Constitution had a promise to include these protections of citizens' rights in order to get enough of the states to ratify the Constitution. Amendment 1 protects basic civil liberties, or our basic freedoms. It prevents Congress from passing laws limiting citizens' freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press. It also says that citizens can assemble or gather together freely. Citizens also have the right to ask the government to correct injustices. As we learn about these amendments and these rights, remember that there are limits to all of these protections. Freedom of speech says that you have the right to say what you want. However, there are limits to those. For example, you can't yell fire in a movie theater and cause a panic. You have freedom of the press, but those members of the press must take that responsibility very carefully and realize that there are limits to the things that they can put into the newspaper. They have to be responsible with the privileges that they've been given. And the right to assemble, it's a right to assemble peacefully. You can't just assemble and cause panic and anarchy. So there's limits to all of these, as you'll see as we go through. So let's move on to Amendment 2. So Amendment 2 says that the federal government cannot prevent the people from having weapons. This amendment was meant to ensure that states and citizens could protect themselves from the military power of a cruel government, as the colonists did during the Revolution. Many people believe that this amendment was meant to protect the rights of states to have armed militias. And for this reason, the right of an individual to carry weapons has become controversial in modern times. You might often hear that people kill people. And then there's a whole other group of people that say, no, it's guns that kill people. But note that the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, we know that the rights of the people to own guns has been limited in different ways, whether that's the type of gun people can own or the amount of guns or the age that you have to be to purchase a gun. So again, we see limits on this. But the idea is that people have a right, individual citizens have a right to carry weapons because they have a right to protect themselves from a cruel government. Amendment 3. Amendment 3 says that citizens cannot be forced to let soldiers stay in their homes during peacetime. Okay, now a really important word there is during peacetime. Now, if we were in a state of war, the government is going to do what it has to do in order to protect us. But this is one of those amendments, as you may imagine, that is not really as controversial or perhaps as important to us today as maybe it was in earlier days. And you may notice this picture has a British soldier who's saying to repeal the Third Amendment. And this is just to remind us that this amendment really came about because of the Quartering Act back in the late 1700s that caused colonists in the American Revolution to house British soldiers. They were so upset about that that when they had the opportunity to make a rule against it, they did. The Fourth Amendment. Amendment 4 extends the people's right to privacy. It requires that a search warrant, like the one shown here, be issued before a citizen's home or belongings can be searched. Now, there are limits to that. You will hear, when it comes to discussions of the Fourth Amendment, a phrase, and that phrase is probable cause. And probable cause is the idea that a reasonable person would believe that there is a significant reason for the police to be able to stop and search you. Perhaps there is an alarm going off in a bank and the police come around the corner and they see you running away. They tell you to stop and you don't. You have just given them probable cause to stop you and search you for the money from the bank that was taken. Or perhaps there is smoke coming from underneath your door. So instead of going to get a search warrant to find out if you're okay, they're going to kick down the door and see if your house is on fire. So probable cause is going to give the police the ability to search you without having a search warrant. But let's go on. When talking about a search warrant, a warrant can be issued only if a judge decides that it is likely that evidence of a crime will be found. The warrant must state exactly what evidence the government is looking for. And as you can see, this search warrant that I've included here, you'd see there's a whole bunch of reasons why the police are going to be searching, what they're looking for, why they're choosing the time that they're searching, what cars they're going to search, what rooms they're going to search. It's going to be pretty extensive because the court wants to make sure that people's rights are being protected. So that is the Fourth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment requires that an indictment or an official accusation be issued before a citizen can be held for a serious crime. It lists several protections for you. First of all, you are protected from double jeopardy. And double jeopardy is being tried more than once for the same crime. In other words, if a citizen is found not guilty in a trial, the government cannot keep bringing the case to trial. Citizens found guilty do have the right of appeal, however. You also have the right to remain silent. And we hear that a lot in police shows and things like that. You have the right to not incriminate yourself, to not have to testify against yourself. And you'll see here that you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And really, that means the police cannot take away your life. They cannot take away your freedom or your liberty or your property without the courts having something to say about that. You'll also see that your private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. And that's what's being illustrated here. And this is the idea of something called eminent domain. And what eminent domain is, there is from time to time the necessity for the government to take away property. Perhaps they need to put in a school, or they need to put in an off-ramp for a freeway, or they're going to put a freeway in and it happens to be right where your house is. Well, the government does have the right to take property away from you, but they have to pay you the fair market price. So the Fifth Amendment is a pretty important amendment covering a lot of different things. So again, let me hit due process one more time to make sure that you clearly understand it. This amendment guarantees due process of law, and due process means that all of the procedures for fair treatment must be carried out whenever a citizen is accused of a crime. So again, taking away your life, your liberty, or your property, the court must make sure, as far as is possible for them, that all of your rights have been protected. That is due process of law. Amendment 6 guarantees the right to a speedy and public trial. It is intended to protect citizens from being kept in jail for long periods of time before they are brought to a trial. That's why you have the right to a speedy trial. Citizens also have the right to know the charges being brought against them and to have a lawyer help them defend themselves in court. So this amendment really makes sure that people know what is going on in their courts. Again, this amendment deals with the courts. So just to recap, you have the right to an attorney. You have the right to confront witnesses and to call your own witnesses. And you have the right to a trial, a public trial with a jury of your peers in the state or district where the crime was committed. So this is the Sixth Amendment. Again, it's a very important amendment. You'll see this a lot on police shows, but this is really an important amendment that deals with court cases and the protection of those accused of crimes. The Seventh Amendment is similar to the Sixth Amendment because it ensures that citizens have the right to a trial by jury in what are called civil cases, which deal with lawsuits that award money to individuals for damages someone else may have caused them. So the Sixth Amendment deals with criminal cases, and the Seventh Amendment deals with civil cases or cases involving lawsuits. Now, you can request a trial with just a judge, but you have the right to a trial by jury. Amendment 8. It limits the fines and punishments that the government can impose on criminals. There can be no cruel and unusual punishment, no excessive bail, no excessive fines, nor cruel and unusual punishment. And that is a very important phrase. So in this picture that we see here, is it cruel or unusual to have a person who stole from Walmart wear a sandwich board like what they're wearing out in front of Walmart and have people mock them all day? Is it cruel and unusual to have someone behind bars for 20 years for, let's say, stealing a loaf of bread? Is it cruel to electrocute someone or even to put someone to death? These are all things that the court must decide. What is cruel and unusual punishment? And of course, people are going to differ on what it is, and that's why we have the court to explain the laws. Amendment number 9 guarantees that rights are not denied to the people simply because they are not listed in the Constitution. So basically, what the Ninth Amendment says is that you have rights that aren't specifically listed. Some of those that have been made more prominent or are more well known is that you're innocent until proven guilty. Now, nowhere is that written down in the Constitution, but we have accepted that as part of our society, that we're going to assume that someone is innocent until they are proven guilty and not the other way around. Another one that we really throw into the Ninth Amendment is your right to privacy. And you see that illustrated in a lot of different ways here. Some people get very upset about seeing video cameras at street intersections and having themselves being caught on tape. Another area where we see the right to privacy discussed is scanners at airports and whether or not that is an invasion of your privacy. So again, Amendment 9 says that just because something is not listed in the Constitution, the right is not listed, it does not mean you don't have that right. And number 10, the last of the Bill of Rights. Amendment 10 establishes the so-called reserved powers. It states that the powers that are not specifically given to the national government, as long as they're not specifically denied to the states, are reserved for the states and the people. So this is really where we talk about states' rights. So again, rights that are not specifically given to the national government, as long as they're not specifically denied to the states, are reserved or left to the states to handle. So that's the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. If any of that was unclear, feel free to go back and watch it again. The more you watch it, the more you'll get out of it. And remember, these rights are really important to understand because they play a part in our society every day. We see them on TV, we read about them in the newspaper, and we see people claiming them as they try to protect themselves from the abuses of government. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.